The woman stepped off the stagecoach into the dust of a dying Montana town with nothing but a worn carpet bag and a heart full of foolish hope, only to be told by the first man she met that spring planting season had passed 3 weeks ago. Eleanor Hartley stood in the October chill of 1884, her Boston traveling dress already coated with the fine powder that seemed to cover everything in Copper Ridge. The driver had deposited her trunk with an unceremonious thud before climbing back onto his perch, and she watched the coach disappear down the rutted main street with a sinking feeling in her chest. Behind her, the general store stood with peeling paint and a crooked sign. Ahead, a saloon emitted the tinny sound of an out-of-tune piano. Between these establishments stretched a collection of weathered buildings that barely deserved the name of town. "You looking lost, miss?" The voice came from her left, not quite a question. Eleanor turned to find a man leaning against the hitching post. One boot crossed over the other in a posture of deliberate ease. He wore the clothing of a working ranch hand, brown leather vest over a faded blue shirt, denim trousers dusty from riding, and a hat that had seen better years. But it was his face that caught her attention, lean and tanned, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he spent more time squinting at horizons than at account books. Those eyes were a startling gray, like storm clouds over the prairie, and they regarded her with an expression somewhere between curiosity and amusement. "I am looking for the land office," Eleanor said, lifting her chin. "I have purchased property here." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Property in Copper Ridge." "Yes, 40 acres, 3 miles west of town. The advertisement said it was prime agricultural land suitable for—" "When did you buy this land?" "The deed was finalized in August. I have been settling my affairs in Boston and August." The man pushed off from the hitching post and walked toward her with a rolling gait that spoke of years in the saddle. "And you are arriving now, in October?" "Yes. Is there a problem?" He stopped a few feet away, and she could see his mouth twitching as though he were fighting a smile. "Miss, I do not know what they told you in Boston, but out here, if you are planning to farm, you plant in the spring. Maybe early summer if you're lucky and the weather holds. October is when we are finishing harvest, not starting it. You have come in the wrong season for planting." The words hit her like a physical blow. Eleanor had spent the last of her inheritance on that land, on the supplies she had shipped ahead, on the stagecoach fare that had brought her across half a continent. She had burned every bridge in Boston, refused every suitor her aunt had paraded before her, rejected the life of genteel poverty that awaited unmarried women of diminished fortune. She had studied books on agriculture, memorized planting schedules, dreamed of a life built by her own hands. "I see," she said quietly, and hated how her voice wavered. The man must have heard it too, because his expression shifted from amusement to something softer. "The land office is closed anyway. McCready only opens it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and today is Saturday. You have luggage?" "A trunk, and this bag." He glanced at the trunk, then back at her. "You are planning to live out there? On your 40 acres? "Yes, the property includes a cabin according to the advertisement." "Right." He sighed, a sound of resignation that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Miss, I do not mean to crush all your hopes in one afternoon, but that cabin is likely 4 walls and a roof if you are lucky. Maybe not even all 4 walls. These land companies, they stretch the truth thinner than good pastry." Eleanor felt something fierce and stubborn rise up in her chest. The same feeling that had made her stand up to her aunt, that had made her refuse to marry old Mr. Pemberton with his wandering hands and his fortune built on her desperation. "Then I will repair it. In October, with winter coming on." "Yes." They stared at each other, and Eleanor refused to look away first. She had not come all this way to be defeated by a sardonic cowboy in a calendar. After a long moment, the man shook his head, but that fighting smile was back at the corners of his mouth. "Stubborn," he said. "All right. You need a place to stay until Tuesday at least, and the boarding house burned down last month. The hotel is not fit for livestock. There is a widow, Mrs. Chen, who takes in lodgers sometimes. I will show you." "I do not need—" "Yes, you do. You do not know this town. You do not know where anything is, and it will be dark in a few hours. I am being neighborly, not insulting. Now, do you want help with that trunk, or are you planning to carry it yourself? Eleanor wanted to argue, but practicality won out. I would appreciate your assistance. He hoisted her trunk onto his shoulder with an ease that suggested it weighed nothing, though Eleanor knew it was packed full of books and clothes and tools. Name is James Holloway. My friends call me Holt. Eleanor Hartley. Miss Hartley. Miss Hartley who bought 40 acres at the wrong time of year. But his tone was gentle, not mocking. Come on then, Mrs. Chen is this way. He led her down the main street, nodding to the few people they passed. A woman in a faded calico dress emerged from the general store with a basket over her arm and stopped to stare at Eleanor with frank curiosity. Two men loading supplies onto a wagon paused in their work to watch. Eleanor kept her back straight and her eyes forward, refusing to be cowed by their attention. Mrs. Chen's house stood at the end of a side street, a neat structure painted white with green shutters, and a garden that even in October showed signs of careful tending. Holt set the trunk down on the porch and knocked. The woman who answered was small and fine-boned, her dark hair streaked with silver and pulled back in a practical bun. She looked at Holt, then at Eleanor, and something knowing passed across her face. You brought me a lodger, Mr. Holloway? If you have room, Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Hartley from Boston. She is going to be staying in Copper Ridge. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose in the same skeptical expression Holt had worn earlier. Staying? You have family here, Miss Hartley. No, I have purchased land. I am going to farm it. There was a moment of silence. Then Mrs. Chen opened the door wider. Come in, both of you. I will make tea. The interior of the house was warm and smelled of bread and herbs. Mrs. Chen led them to a parlor furnished with simple but well-made pieces, crocheted doilies on every surface, and photographs in frames on the mantelpiece. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a tray bearing a teapot and cups painted with delicate blue patterns. My husband brought these from San Francisco, she said, pouring, before he died. That was 12 years ago now. Sit, please. Eleanor sank into a chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The journey from Boston had taken 2 weeks, sleeping in railroad stations and enduring the swaying of the stagecoach. Her muscles ached and her head throbbed, and the weight of Holt's words pressed down on her. Wrong season, wrong time, wrong everything. Now, Mrs. Chen said, handing her a cup, tell me about this land you have bought. Eleanor explained the advertisement, the correspondence with the land company, the deed that promised 40 acres of fertile soil ready for cultivation. As she spoke, she watched Mrs. Chen's face, seeing the sympathy gather there like clouds. The Morrison property, Mrs. Chen said when Eleanor finished. Yes, I know it. The cabin is still standing, more or less. Morrison died 3 years ago, and his widow went back east to live with her daughter. It is not bad land, Miss Hartley, but it is not easy either. The soil is decent if you work it right, but there is a reason it has sat empty. It takes more than one person to run a farm out here, especially starting from nothing. I am not afraid of work. I can see that, but work is not always enough. Mrs. Chen sipped her tea. However, you are here now, and turning back will not return your money or your time. You need a place to stay while you determine what to do next. I have a room upstairs, clean and warm, $2 a week, meals included. That is very generous. That is practical. I like company. And I like people who are not afraid to try difficult things, even foolish things. She smiled slightly. Sometimes there is not much difference between bravery and foolishness. We do not know which until it is over. Holt had been sitting quietly, drinking his tea and watching the exchange. Now he set down his cup. I should get back to the ranch before dark. Miss Hartley, the Morrison place is on Broken Creek ranch land, or near enough. We share a border. If you need help getting out there, come by the ranch. Anyone in town can give you directions. Why would you help me? Eleanor asked, surprising herself with the directness of the question. He looked at her for a long moment, those gray eyes serious. Because you are going to try this whether anyone helps you or not, and I would rather not have you die of stubbornness 3 miles from where I lay my head at night. Bad for the conscience. How thoughtful. I am known for it. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. Mrs. Chen, thank you for the tea. Miss Hartley, welcome to Montana. Try not to freeze before spring. He left, and the room seemed quieter without him. Mrs. Chen collected the cups with a small smile playing at her lips. He is a good man, that one. Works for the Broken Creek Ranch. Has for 5 years. Before that he was drifting, I think. A lot of men drift out here, but he stayed. Why? Mrs. Chen paused, cups balanced on her tray. I think he was looking for a place to stop. Maybe you are too. The words settled into Eleanor's chest, uncomfortably close to truth. She had told herself she was seeking independence, opportunity, a life of her own making. But perhaps what she had really been seeking was a place where she could finally exhale, where she did not have to be Miss Eleanor Hartley of the Boston Hartleys, diminished but still expected to maintain appearances, still expected to smile at men she despised and pretend she did not have thoughts of her own. Perhaps, she said quietly. Mrs. Chen showed her to a small room upstairs, clean as promised, with a bed covered in a quilt of intricate pattern and a window that looked out over the garden. Eleanor unpacked her carpet bag with mechanical motions, hanging her 2 dresses in the narrow wardrobe, setting her brush and mirror on the dresser. Her reflection looked back at her, and she barely recognized the woman there. Her dark blonde hair was falling out of its pins. Her face was smudged with dust, and her eyes had a wild look she had never seen in the careful mirrors of Boston. She slept poorly that night, dreaming of fields that would not grow and cabins that collapsed when she touched them. When she woke, pale light was filtering through the window, and she could hear Mrs. Chen moving around downstairs. She dressed in her simpler gray dress and went down to find breakfast already laid out on the kitchen table. Eat, Mrs. Chen said. Then we will talk about practical matters. The practical matters turned out to be a list of what Eleanor would need to survive a Montana winter in a questionably intact cabin. Firewood, laid in and stacked. Supplies bought in quantity because once the snow came, trips to town would be difficult. Repairs to the cabin that could not wait. And most pressing, an assessment of what actually existed on the property versus what the land company had promised. You will need to go out there, Mrs. Chen said. See what you're working with. But you should not go alone, not the first time. The land runs up against the mountains, and there are animals. Bears mostly getting ready for winter. They do not usually bother people, but usually is not the same as never. Mr. Holloway said I could ask for help at the ranch. Then you should go today. It is Sunday, so some of the hands will be around. Broken Creek is a big operation, one of the biggest in the valley. They run cattle up in the summer pastures and bring them down for winter. It is good land. Unlike mine, Mrs. Chen gave her a level look. Your land is what you make it, Miss Hartley, same as anything else in life. After breakfast, Eleanor walked back into town to get directions to Broken Creek Ranch. The woman at the general store, the same one who had stared yesterday, proved more helpful today. Her name was Mrs. Patterson, and once she finished examining Eleanor from head to toe, she warmed slightly. Broken Creek is about 4 miles north, she said. Follow the main road out of town until you see the gate with the brand on it. You cannot miss it. Though I do not know if they will appreciate a woman showing up on a Sunday asking for favors. Mr. Holloway suggested I come. Holt did? Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted to something between interest and speculation. Well, that is different then. He is a foreman there, got some say in things. You tell them Holt sent you, they will probably help. He is well liked. Eleanor thanked her and set out walking. The October morning was crisp and clear. The sky an impossible blue that seemed to stretch forever. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already white with snow. The air smelled different here, clean and sharp, without the coal smoke and horse manure and human density of Boston. She passed farms on the outskirts of town, saw cattle grazing behind fences, watched a hawk circle overhead with lazy grace. The gate to Broken Creek Ranch was indeed impossible to miss. a massive timber structure with the ranch brand burned into the crossbeam. A long drive led from the gate to a cluster of buildings in the distance. Eleanor walked it with growing trepidation, aware that she was a stranger arriving unannounced on someone else's property. As she approached, she could see the ranch was substantial. A large house stood at the center, 2 stories with a wide porch. Around it clustered a barn, several outbuildings, corrals where horses moved lazily, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Men were moving around doing the work that apparently never ceased even on Sundays. One of them noticed her and called out, and several heads turned. Holt emerged from the barn, and even at a distance she recognized his walk. When he saw her, he changed direction, meeting her halfway across the yard. "Miss Hartley, I did not expect you quite so soon. Mrs. Chen suggested I should see the property today, and you offered help." "I did." He glanced back at the other men who were watching with undisguised curiosity. "Wait here a moment." He strode over to the group and spoke briefly. One man laughed, another clapped him on the shoulder, and then Holt was walking toward the barn. He emerged a few minutes later leading 2 horses, one already saddled, the other wearing a saddle that looked older and more worn than the first. "You ride?" "I have ridden in Boston." His mouth twitched. "English saddle? Sedate paths through parks?" "Yes. This will be different, but the mare is gentle. Her name is Daisy, and she is approximately 1,000 years old, so she will not do anything exciting. Come on, I will help you up." Eleanor had indeed ridden in Boston, but those rides bore little resemblance to sitting astride a Western saddle on a horse that seemed alarmingly tall. Holt adjusted her stirrups, his hands quick and impersonal, then swung onto his own mount with fluid ease. "The Morrison place is about 30 minutes from here. Just follow me and holler if you need to stop." They rode out through another gate and across open rangeland. Eleanor clung to the saddle horn with more determination than grace, but Daisy plodded along with patient indifference to her rider's inexperience. Holt rode beside her, not speaking, and she was grateful for the silence. It gave her time to look around, to take in the vast sweep of land rolling away in all directions, the distant mountains, the sky that seemed impossibly large after Boston's narrow streets. "It is so empty," she said finally. "Not empty, just not full of people. Look there." He pointed to a cluster of pronghorn in the distance, and there. A eagle soared overhead. "The land is full of life. You just have to learn to see it different." They rode on, and Eleanor began to relax slightly into the rhythm of the horse beneath her. The air was cool, but the sun was warm on her back, and despite everything, despite the wrongness of her timing and the uncertainty of her future, she felt something in her chest loosen. This was why she had come. Not for farming, not really, for this, for space and sky and the chance to breathe. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a small valley with a creek running the silver behind it. Mountains rose at its back, covered in pine and aspen. The trees were gold and red with autumn color, startling against the dark green of the evergreens. It would have been beautiful, except that the cabin itself was exactly what Holt had predicted. 4 walls, more or less, or a roof that sagged in the middle, a door hanging crooked on its hinges, windows that gaped empty of glass. Eleanor slid down from Daisy's back and walked forward slowly. The cabin was small, perhaps 20 feet square, built of rough logs chinked with mud. Some of the chinking had fallen out, leaving gaps that would whistle with wind. The roof was made of sod over wooden planks, and several places showed ominous dips. Behind the cabin stood a shed that leaned at a precarious angle, and near the creek was what might have once been a garden plot, now overgrown with weeds. "Well," she said, "it is standing. Parts of it." Holt had dismounted and was examining the structure with a critical eye. "The logs are sound, mostly. Morrison knew how to build. He just did not keep up with maintenance after his wife got sick. Roof needs work, badly. Those windows need glass or at least oiled paper before winter. Door needs rehinging. Chinking needs repair." He walked around the side. "Chimney is intact. That is good. You will need that." Eleanor pushed open the door, which scraped across the floor with a tortured sound. Inside, the cabin was dim and smelled of dust and mouse droppings. A rough table stood against one wall, a chair with a broken back beside it. A bed frame made of lashed poles occupied another corner, the rope webbing that would have held a mattress hanging loose and rotted. A stone fireplace took up most of the far wall, its hearth littered with old ashes and debris. "Could I live here?" she asked quietly. Holt came to stand beside her in the doorway. "With work? Yes. You could survive here. Whether you would want to is another question. I do not have another choice. I spent everything to come here." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Why?" "Why what?" "Why did you come here? To Montana? To the middle of nowhere? To buy land you had never seen? You do not talk like a woman running from the law or from a husband, so why?" Eleanor kept her eyes on the cabin, on the dust motes drifting in the light from the empty windows. "Because in Boston my future was already decided. I would live with my aunt, being grateful for her charity until I agreed to marry whoever she deemed suitable. I would have a life that was comfortable and utterly suffocating, where every thought and word and action was prescribed. I read an article about Western land, about opportunities for people willing to work. I sold my mother's jewelry, the only thing I had left of value, and bought this place. I thought I could build something of my own, something that belonged to me. And now you are here, and it is not what you expected." "No, but I'm still here, and it is still mine." She turned to look at him. "You think I'm foolish?" "I think you are brave. Also foolish, but the two go together more often than not." He stepped into the cabin, his boots loud on the plank floor. "If you are determined to try this, you will need help. The ranch hands and I can get this place weather-tight in a few days if we work hard. We are between roundup and winter feeding, so we have some time. But Miss Hartley, you need to understand what you are taking on. Winter here is not like Boston winter. It is colder, longer, and more dangerous. You will be alone out here, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor. If something happens, if you get hurt or sick, you could die before anyone found you." "Then I will have to not get hurt or sick." He shook his head, but she was starting to recognize that look, the one that said he wanted to argue but knew it would not accomplish anything. "Stubborn?" he repeated. "All right, let me talk to the ranch owner, Mr. Sullivan. I think I can convince him to spare some men and materials. We will start tomorrow if the weather holds." "Why would he agree to that? He does not know me." "Because that is what people do out here. We help each other because we have to. You cannot survive alone in this country." He walked back to the door. "Come on, I will show you the property lines, and then we should head back before dark." They spent the next hour riding the boundaries of her 40 acres. Holt pointed out landmarks, explained where the water sources were, showed her the stand of timber that would provide firewood. The land was rougher than she had imagined, rolling and rocky, but the creek ran clear and strong, and Holt admitted that the soil in the flatter areas was workable. "You will not be able to plant much next spring," he said. "You need to clear more land first, break up the soil, get it ready, maybe an acre if you work all winter on it. That will give you enough for a vegetable garden and some grain. You will not make money on it, not for years, but you could grow enough to feed yourself." "That is all I need, to feed myself." "People need more than food." "Such as?" He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Purpose, company, a reason to get up in the morning besides just surviving another day. "And you have those things?" "I have my work, I have the ranch, it is enough." But the way he said it made Eleanor think it was not quite, and she wondered what had brought him to Montana, what he had left behind or run from. They all seemed to be running from something, she thought, or toward something. Maybe there was not much difference. The ride back to Broken Creek was quieter. The sun was lowering, painting the mountains orange and pink, and the air grew colder. Eleanor's muscles ached from the unaccustomed riding, but it was a good ache, earned and honest. When they reached the ranch, Holt helped her down from Daisy with a steadying hand on her elbow. "I will walk you back to Mrs. Chen's," he said. "That is not necessary." "Maybe not. I am going to do it anyway." They walked in silence for the first mile, leading the horses. Then Holt said, "Miss Hartley, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Are you really prepared to stay? Because if you are not, if there is any doubt in your mind, you should leave now. Before winter sets in, before you invest more than you already have. There's no shame in admitting this is not what you wanted." Eleanor thought about Boston, about her aunt's parlor with its heavy drapes and disapproving silences, about Mr. Pemberton and his wet smile, about the life that waited for her there, safe and dead. "I am staying," she said. He said, "Come spring I will plant, and whatever grows, grows." Holt looked at her for a long moment, and then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. "Good," he said. "Stay forever." The words hung in the air between them, strange and weighty, like a promise or a blessing or a challenge. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm and was grateful for the gathering dusk that hid her blush. "I will try," she said quietly. They reached Mrs. Chen's house just as full dark fell. Holt tipped his hat to her, his face shadowed under the brim. "I will send word tomorrow about the work party. Get some rest, Miss Hartley. You are going to need it." He left, leading both horses, and Eleanor stood on the porch watching until he disappeared into the darkness. Her heart was beating strangely fast, and she told herself it was just exhaustion, just the excitement and fear of everything changing. But she knew, with a clarity that was almost frightening, that it was more than that. She was in trouble, and she had only been in Montana for 2 days. Mrs. Chen was waiting inside with hot soup and knowing eyes. "So, how bad is it?" "The cabin? Bad. Fixable, perhaps, but bad." "And Mr. Holloway?" "He was helpful." Eleanor focused on her soup, unwilling to meet that knowing gaze. "Helpful? Yes, I'm sure he was." Mrs. Chen smiled into her own bowl. "He is a good man, as I said. Lonely, I think. He works hard, saves his money, but he does not seem to know what he is saving for. Maybe he is figuring it out now." "Mrs. Chen, I barely know him. I've spoken to him twice." "Sometimes twice is enough. My husband asked me to marry him the second time we met. I thought he was insane, but I said yes anyway, and we had 23 good years before the fever took him." She set down her spoon. "I am not saying you should marry Mr. Holloway, Miss Hartley. I'm only saying that sometimes the heart knows things the head has not figured out yet, and there is nothing wrong with that." Eleanor wanted to argue, but the words would not come. So she finished her soup in silence and went upstairs to her room, where she lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind outside and thinking about gray eyes and a voice that said, "Stay forever." The next day dawned clear and cold. Eleanor woke early, dressed in her simplest clothes, and came downstairs to find Mrs. Chen already preparing breakfast. They ate together, talking about inconsequential things, and then Eleanor set out for town. She needed to visit the land office, see her deed properly registered, and buy supplies if she was going to be living in that cabin. The land office was open, a small room attached to the general store. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles and an aggrieved expression, examined her deed with the air of someone who had seen every kind of foolishness and was no longer impressed. "Morrison property. Yes, this is in order. 40 acres, creek access, timber rights. You understand the land company sold this as is, no guarantees of condition or usability?" "I understand." "And you have seen it?" "Yesterday." "And you still want to register the deed?" "Yes." He sighed and pulled out a massive ledger, making entries with a scratchy pen. When he finished, he stamped the deed with an official seal and slid it across the desk. "Welcome to property ownership in Montana Territory, Miss Hartley. I hope you know what you are doing." "So do I," Eleanor said honestly. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson helped her compile a list of essentials: flour, sugar, salt, coffee, lard, beans, rice, dried fruit, canned goods, soap, lamp oil, candles, matches. The total made Eleanor's remaining money shrink alarmingly, but Mrs. Patterson was firm. "You need enough for 3 months at least," she said, "maybe 4. Once the snow comes, you will not be getting to town easily, and you do not want to run out of flour in January, believe me." Eleanor also bought fabric for curtains, nails, tools, and several thick wool blankets. Mrs. Patterson added a coat to the pile without being asked, a practical canvas garment lined with flannel. "You will freeze in that Boston coat," she said. "This one belonged to my son before he went to California. It will fit you well enough, and he will not be needing it." "I cannot." "You can, and you will. Consider it a welcome gift. We do not get many women in Copper Ridge brave enough or crazy enough to homestead alone. I am rooting for you, even if I think you're going to regret it come February." Eleanor felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. Thank me by surviving the winter and giving me someone interesting to talk to. This town could use more interesting people." Eleanor was arranging for her purchases to be held until she could collect them when the door opened and Holt walked in, followed by 2 other men. One was older, perhaps 50, with a weathered face and sharp blue eyes. The other was younger, close to Eleanor's own 23 years, with a quick grin and red hair. "Miss Hartley," Holt said, "this is Mr. Sullivan, owner of Broken Creek Ranch, and this is Tommy Reed, one of our hands. Mr. Sullivan, Tommy, this is Miss Eleanor Hartley, our new neighbor." "Mr." Sullivan extended a calloused hand, and Eleanor shook it, surprised by the firm grip. "Holt tells me you have bought the Morrison place and are planning to make a go of it. That true?" "Yes, sir. Call me Sullivan, everyone does." He looked her up and down, not rudely but assessingly, as though she were a horse he was considering buying. "Holt also tells me you need help getting the place weather-tight before winter. I am willing to lend you 3 men for 3 days. We will fix the roof, replace the windows, repair the chinking. After that, you are on your own. Fair?" "More than fair. I can pay—" "No payment. Like I said, we are neighbors, and neighbors help each other. But if you make it through the winter and get crops in next year, I will expect you to return the favor somehow. Maybe fresh vegetables come summer. My cook gets tired of feeding us beans and potatoes." Eleanor felt the tears threaten again. "Thank you. I do not know what to say." "Say you will work hard and not give up the first time things get difficult. That is all I ask." Sullivan tipped his hat. "We will be out at your place tomorrow morning early. Holt will bring a wagon with supplies. You make sure you are there and ready to work. We will not do it for you, but we will do it with you. Understood?" "Understood." The 3 men left, and Eleanor stood in the middle of the general store, clutching her deed and fighting the urge to cry. Mrs. Patterson came around the counter and patted her shoulder. "See, I told you. We take care of our own out here. And I suppose you are one of us now, for better or worse." Eleanor spent the rest of the day preparing. She packed a bag with clothes and essentials, bundled up her blankets, arranged with Mrs. Chen to keep her room but stay at the cabin for the next few days. Mrs. Chen insisted on packing a basket of food, bread and cheese and apples, and a jar of preserves. "You will need your strength," she said, "and the men will appreciate something to eat midday. Bring this basket back when you can." That evening, Eleanor sat in her little room and wrote a letter to her aunt in Boston. She tried to explain what she had done, why she had done it, what she hoped to accomplish. But as she wrote, she realized her aunt would never understand. To her aunt, security and social position were the only things that mattered, and Eleanor had thrown both away. She sealed the letter anyway and addressed it, though she doubted her aunt would reply. She slept poorly again, anxious about the next day. When dawn came, she was already dressed and downstairs eating the breakfast Mrs. Chen had prepared. At 7 o'clock, she heard the rattle of a wagon outside. Holt sat on the driver's seat, reins in his hands, and the bed of the wagon was loaded with lumber tools and supplies. "Ready?" he called. "Ready." She climbed up beside him, very aware of his solid presence next to her on the narrow seat. The wagon lurched into motion, and they rolled through the quiet morning streets and out onto the road leading west. The sun was just clearing the mountains, painting everything gold and rose. Nervous? Holt asked. Terrified. He glanced at her, surprised, and she realized it was perhaps the most honest thing she had said to him. Good. Means you are taking it seriously, but you will be all right, Miss Hartley. I have a feeling about you. What kind of feeling? That you are stronger than you look, and more stubborn than is strictly wise. But he was smiling as he said it. They reached the cabin just as Tommy and another man arrived on horseback. Sullivan appeared shortly after, riding a big bay gelding. The men dismounted and stood looking at the cabin with the critical eyes of people who knew construction. Right, Sullivan said. Holt, you and Tommy start on the roof. Miss Hartley, you and I will work on the chinking. Ben, he nodded to the other man, a silent type with a black beard. You get those windows measured and cut. We brought glass. Ought to be enough for all four. Let us get to work. Eleanor had never worked so hard in her life. Sullivan showed her how to mix mud and straw to make chinking, how to press it into the gaps between logs, how to smooth it so it would seal properly. Her hands were soon filthy, her arms aching, but she kept at it. Sullivan worked beside her, saying little, but offering quiet corrections when she got it wrong. On the roof, Holt and Tommy were stripping away the old sod and examining the planks beneath. Holt called down that several planks needed replacing, and Sullivan grunted acknowledgement. Ben worked with quiet efficiency, measuring and cutting, and by midday the first window had glass in it, sealed with putty and gleaming in the sun. When the sun was high, Eleanor brought out Mrs. Chen's basket. The men stopped work and gathered in the shade of the cabin, eating with the focused intensity of people who use their bodies hard every day. Eleanor ate her own portion, too tired to be hungry, but knowing she needed the fuel. You are doing good work, Sullivan said, wiping his mouth. Most women from back east would have given up by now or be standing around watching us work. You have got grit. I have got no choice, Eleanor replied. We always have choices. You are making yours. That counts for something. They worked through the afternoon. Eleanor's hands blistered, then the blisters broke, then her hands went numb. She did not complain. Around her the men moved with practiced efficiency, and slowly the cabin transformed. The roof became solid, the windows clear, the walls sealed. By the time the sun was lowering, the place looked almost habitable. That is enough for today, Sullivan finally said. Good work, all of you. Same time tomorrow. They packed up the tools and rode off, leaving Eleanor and Holt alone. He lingered after the others left, examining the door hinges he had not yet fixed. You should come back to town with me, he said. No sense staying here tonight, no furniture, no firewood laid in yet. Come back, get a good night's sleep, and we will continue tomorrow. Eleanor looked at her cabin, at the work they had done, at the place that was becoming hers. All right, but tomorrow night I stay. I want to sleep in my own house. Fair enough, come on then. The ride back to town was quiet. Eleanor was too tired for conversation, and Holt seemed content with the silence. When they reached Mrs. Chen's house, he helped her down from the wagon, and his hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. You did good today, Miss Hartley, real good. Eleanor, she said impulsively, if we are going to be neighbors, you should call me Eleanor. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. Eleanor, and you should call me Holt. Everyone does. Holt, then. Thank you for everything. You're welcome. See you tomorrow, Eleanor. She watched him drive away, then went inside to face Mrs. Chen's knowing smile and a much-needed hot bath. Her muscles screamed when she lowered herself into the water, but it was a good pain, earned pain. She felt more real than she had in years. The next 2 days passed in a blur of hard work. The roof was finished, properly sealed and solid. All 4 windows got glass. The door was rehinged and fitted with a proper latch. Ben built a new bed frame, while Eleanor and Tommy cleaned years of dirt and debris from inside the cabin. Sullivan showed her how to maintain the chimney, how to bank a fire properly, how to check for cracked stones that could cause danger. By the end of the 3rd day, the cabin was transformed. It would never be beautiful, but it was solid, warm, and weather-tight. Eleanor stood inside her home watching the sunset through clean windows and felt pride swell in her chest. "You have done well," Sullivan said, coming to stand beside her. "This place will see you through the winter, long as you stay smart and careful. You have food laid in?" "Mrs. Patterson is holding supplies for me at the store. I will bring them out this week." "Good. And firewood? That is your priority now. You need cords and cords of it, cut and stacked. That will take you most of the rest of the fall." "I can manage." "I am sure you can, but if you need help, ask. Pride is fine, but it does not keep you warm when the temperature drops below zero." He handed her a piece of paper. "This is a list of what you need to do before the first snow. Follow it, and you will be all right. Probably." Eleanor took the list, touched by the gesture. "Thank you for all of this. I do not know how to repay you." "Survive. That is repayment enough. And maybe you will have a good story to tell come spring." He tipped his hat and left, Ben following behind. Tommy had already ridden out, which left only Holt. He was checking the last of the windows, making sure the putty had set properly. When he finished, he turned to Eleanor with an expression she could not quite read. "So, you are really staying out here tonight? Yes? You have bedding, lamp oil, matches?" "Yes, Holt. Mrs. Chen packed everything I need." "And you know how to work the stove? Build a fire?" "You showed me yesterday, I remember." He nodded, but he did not move toward the door. "I do not like leaving you out here alone." "I will be fine. I know you will. But that does not mean I have to like it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Eleanor, if you need anything, anything at all, you send word to the ranch. Promise me." "I promise. And if there is trouble, if something happens, you fire 3 shots from that rifle Sullivan left you. We will hear it at the ranch and come running." "Holt, I will be fine. I am 3 miles from your bunkhouse, not 300. 3 miles is a long way if something goes wrong." He stepped closer, and Eleanor's breath caught. "I mean it. You need help. You call for it. Your pride is not worth your life." "I know." Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Thank you for caring." "Of course I care. You are our neighbor." But the way he said it, the way he was looking at her, suggested neighbor was not quite the right word. The air between them felt charged, full of things unsaid. Eleanor knew she should step back, should say something light and break the tension, but she did not want to. She had not felt this way about anyone in her life, this pull that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Holt," she began, but he shook his head. "I should go. Getting dark." But he did not move. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm glad you came. To Montana. To Copper Ridge. I know it has been difficult, and I know you are probably questioning every decision you made, but I am glad you are here. Real glad." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "So am I. Glad to be here, I mean. Glad that you were the first person I met." He smiled, that transformative smile that made him look younger and less guarded. "Good. Then we are agreed. Now I really do need to go before it is full dark and I have to ride back by starlight, but I will check on you tomorrow, all right?" "All right." He left finally, and Eleanor stood in the doorway watching him ride away until he disappeared into the dusk. Then she closed the door, lit a lamp, and looked around her cabin. It was small and rough and utterly hers. She made up the bed with her blankets, unpacked her few belongings, and built a fire in the fireplace. The flames caught and spread, and warmth began to fill the room. She cooked a simple meal on the stove, beans and bacon and bread, and ate it sitting at the table that was no longer broken. Outside, full darkness fell, and with it came a silence, unlike anything she had known in Boston. No carriages rattling past, no voices calling, no city sounds, just the wind in the creek and the crack of the fire. She should have been frightened. She was alone in a cabin 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, in a wilderness full of dangers she did not fully understand. But she was not frightened. She was, against all expectation, content. She woke in the night to the sound of something moving outside, heavy footsteps and a snuffling breath. Her heart leapt into her throat, and she lay frozen under her blanket, straining to hear. The sound came again, closer to the cabin. A bear, she thought. Sullivan had warned her about bears. The sound moved away, fading into the distance. Eleanor waited, listening, until she was sure it was gone. Then she got up and checked that the door was properly latched, that the rifle was where Sullivan had left it, loaded and ready. Her hands were shaking, but she felt oddly exhilarated. She was handling this. She was surviving. The next morning dawned cold and bright. Eleanor woke early, built up the fire, and made coffee. She was drinking it on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, when she heard hoofbeats. Holt appeared, riding his big bay, and he relaxed visibly when he saw her. "Morning," he called. "You made it through the night." "I told you I would." He dismounted and joined her on the porch, and she poured him coffee from the pot she had brought outside. He drank it gratefully, his breath steaming in the cold air. "I heard something last night," Eleanor said. "Something big, moving around outside." "Probably a bear. They are getting ready to den up for winter, eating everything they can find. As long as you keep food stored properly and do not leave garbage around, they will not bother you." He paused. "You were not too scared?" "I was terrified, but I stayed in bed and it went away." "Smart. Running outside would have been bad." He finished his coffee. "I have the day off from ranch work. I thought maybe I could help you bring your supplies out from town. That wagon of yours is going to be heavy." "I do not have a wagon." "Sullivan is lending you one. It is at the general store already loaded. Mrs. Patterson has been filling it all week. We just need to bring it out here." "That is very kind, but I can do it myself." "I know you can. But it will be faster with two, and I have nothing else to do. Humor me." She wanted to argue, but the truth was she would appreciate the help. And more than that, she would appreciate the company. "All right, thank you." They rode into town together, Eleanor once again on the ancient Daisy. Mrs. Patterson had indeed loaded a wagon, and it was full to the brim with supplies. Together, Eleanor and Holt drove it back to the cabin, and then spent the rest of the day unloading and organizing. Eleanor stored food in the shed, which Holt declared was secure enough to keep out most animals. They stacked firewood that Sullivan had included, though Holt warned her it was not nearly enough. "You need to start cutting more, soon as possible," he said. "I will help when I can, but most of it will be on you. Can you handle an axe?" "I have never tried." "Then I will teach you." He found an axe in the shed and took her to the stand of timber Sullivan had showed her. He demonstrated the proper stance, the right angle of the blade, how to let the weight of the axe do the work. Then he handed it to Eleanor. She swung awkwardly, missed the log entirely, and nearly dropped the axe. Holt steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "Not so hard, you're trying to muscle it. Let it fall. Guide it. Like this." He stood behind her, his hands over hers on the axe handle, and helped her swing. The blade bit into the wood with a satisfying thunk. "See? You've got it. Now try again." They worked for an hour, Holt offering quiet corrections, and by the end Eleanor could split a log, albeit slowly and with many misses. Her shoulders ached and her hands stung where new blisters were forming, but she felt proud. "That is enough for today, Monseigneur," Holt said. "You'll make yourself too sore to work tomorrow, but you did good, Eleanor. Real good." They walked back to the cabin and Holt collected his horse. He mounted, then looked down at her with an expression of concern and something else, something warmer. "You sure you are all right out here alone?" "Yes." "And you will send word if you need anything?" "Yes, Holt. I promise." "All right then. I will see you in a few days. I am riding up to the high pastures to check on the cattle, but I will come by when I get back. You do not have to keep checking on me." "I know I do not have to. I want to." He tipped his hat and rode off before she could respond. Eleanor watched him go, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She barely knew him. They had spent a handful of days together, mostly doing manual labor, and yet she found herself thinking about him constantly, looking forward to his visits, missing him when he was gone. This was dangerous, she told herself. She had come to Montana for independence, not for romance. She could not let herself become distracted by a cowboy with kind eyes and a rare smile. She had work to do, a winter to survive, a life to build. But that night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the wind, she let herself imagine what it might be like if he stayed. If he came to her cabin not just to help, but to be with her. If those careful hands touched her not in instruction, but in affection. She fell asleep with his name on her lips and dreamed of spring. The next weeks passed in a rhythm of work. Eleanor rose with the sun, built up the fire, made breakfast, and then worked until her body forced her to stop. She cut firewood slowly and painfully at first, then with growing efficiency. She cleared land near the cabin, pulling up brush and rocks, preparing soil for spring planting. She learned to manage the stove, to bank the fire at night so it would last until morning, to cook the simple meals that kept her going. Holt came by every few days, always with some excuse. He had been checking the fence line and thought he would stop in. Sullivan had asked him to drop off more supplies. He wanted to make sure the cabin was holding up well. Each time he stayed longer, helping with whatever task she was working on, sharing meals, talking as the sun set. Eleanor learned his story in pieces. He had grown up in Missouri, left home at 16 after his parents died in a cholera outbreak. He had drifted west, working ranches and mines and whatever else would pay. He had been in Montana for 7 years, at Broken Creek for 5. He was 30 years old, owned a good horse and saddle, had money saved in the bank, and no plans for what came next. "I always thought I was just passing through," he said one evening as they sat on the porch. November had arrived, bringing colder nights and the threat of snow. But somewhere along the way, this started to feel like home. The ranch, the work, the people. I stopped looking for the next thing. Do you ever regret it? Staying in one place? Sometimes, when the winters get long and I feel restless, but mostly no. There's something to be said for knowing where you belong. He glanced at her. Do you feel like you belong here yet? Eleanor considered the question. I do not know. Some days, yes, when I'm working and everything goes right and I can see what this place might become. Other days I feel like an imposter, like I'm playing at being a frontier woman, and any moment someone will call my bluff. You are not an imposter. You are doing the work, surviving the challenges. That makes you real as anyone. Even though I came at the wrong time, even though I did not know what I was getting into, especially because of that, you did not let ignorance or bad timing stop you. That takes courage. They sat in comfortable silence, and Eleanor felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire inside. Holt had become important to her, she realized, not just as a helper or neighbor, but as a friend, maybe more than a friend, though she was afraid to examine that thought too closely. Eleanor, he said quietly, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever think about leaving? About going back to Boston? No, never. Why? Because winter is coming and it is going to be hard, harder than you can imagine. And I worry that when it gets bad, when you are snowed in and lonely and cold, you will regret staying. I will not. How can you be sure? She turned to look at him, meeting those gray eyes directly. Because I have already left Boston. I have already made my choice. There is nothing for me there. But here there is everything. There is possibility. There is freedom. There is... She stopped, not quite brave enough to say, there is you. But he heard it anyway, she thought, because his expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but sure. I am glad, he said, that you are staying. I do not think I realized how lonely I was until you got here. Eleanor's breath caught. Holt! I am not good at this, he interrupted. Talking about feelings, saying the right things. I am better with horses and cattle and hard work, but I need you to know that I care about you more than I probably should, given we have only known each other a few weeks. But there it is. Eleanor squeezed his hand, her heart racing. I care about you too. I have been trying not to because I came here to build a life for myself, not to depend on anyone, but I do. care about you." They sat there, hands linked, and the moment felt impossibly significant, as though something between them had shifted and settled into place. Holt raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes. "We will take this slow," he said. "No rushing, no pressure. We will figure it out as we go. Does that sound all right?" "Yes, that sounds perfect." He left shortly after, but Eleanor felt his presence linger like warmth in the cabin. She went to bed smiling and slept better than she had in weeks. The first snow came a few days later overnight, blanketing the valley in white. Eleanor woke to a world transformed, beautiful, and strange. She bundled up in her new coat and went outside, marveling at the silence. Even the creek seemed muted, its voice softened by the snow. She was shoveling a path to the shed when she heard hoofbeats. Holt appeared, his horse dark against the white landscape, and he was grinning. "First snow," he called. "How do you like it?" "It is beautiful. Wait until February, you will be sick of it." He dismounted and helped her shovel, clearing paths to all the outbuildings. "Snow is going to make getting to town harder. You stocked up on everything?" "I think so." "Good, because this is just the start. We will get more, probably a lot more. You need to be prepared to be stuck out here for days at a time." The thought did not frighten her as much as it might have a month ago. She had food, firewood, shelter, and she had Holt, who would check on her, who would make sure she was all right. They went inside to warm up, and Eleanor made coffee. Holt sat at her table, looking around the cabin with an approving eye. She had made it homier over the past weeks, hanging curtains she had sewn, laying a rag rug on the floor, arranging her few belongings with care. It would never be fancy, but it was comfortable. "You have done well with this place," he said. "It feels like a home now." "Thank you. I have tried. I can tell." He paused. "Eleanor, Sullivan has invited you to Thanksgiving dinner at the ranch. He does it every year, feeds everyone who works for him, plus any neighbors who do not have family around. Will you come?" "When is Thanksgiving?" "Week from Thursday. I know it is a ride in the snow, but I will come get you, make sure you get there safely. And you can stay overnight in one of the guest rooms, head back the next day. What do you say?" The thought of a proper meal, of company and warmth and celebration, was almost overwhelmingly appealing. "I would like that, thank you." "Good. It will be nice, having you there." He finished his coffee and stood. "I should get back, but I will see you before Thanksgiving. And if the weather gets bad, you light a lamp in the window at night. I will be able to see it from the ranch. Know you are all right." "That's a good idea." He left, and Eleanor spent the rest of the day tending to her chores, but her mind was on Thanksgiving, on seeing Holt in a social setting, on meeting more of the people who made up her new community. She was nervous and excited in equal measure. The days until Thanksgiving passed slowly. The snow melted slightly, then froze again, turning the ground treacherous. Eleanor worked carefully, mindful of Sullivan's warnings about injury. She could not afford to break an ankle or sprain a wrist. She had no one to rely on but herself. But she was not entirely alone. Holt came by twice more, once bringing fresh meat that he had shot, once just to check on her. Each visit felt easier, more natural. They talked and laughed and slowly grew comfortable with each other. He told her stories about the ranch, about the other hands, about the cattle drives and roundups and the hard, beautiful work of living on the land. She told him about Boston, about her parents who had died when she was young, about her aunt who had meant well but suffocated her. "She would hate it here," Eleanor said one afternoon as they sat by the fire. "She would think it was barbaric and dirty and beneath me." "Is it?" Holt asked. "Beneath you?" "No, it is the opposite. It is the first time in my life I have felt like I was enough, just as I am. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Thanksgiving Day arrived clear and cold. Holt came for Eleanor in the early afternoon, riding his bay and leading Daisy. Eleanor had dressed in her better dress, dark blue wool with a white collar, and braided her hair. She felt suddenly nervous, like she was going to a party in Boston, except this mattered more. The ride to Broken Creek took longer in the snow, but Eleanor did not mind. She was with Holt, the sky was blue, and the world was beautiful. When they arrived, the ranch was bustling with activity. People were arriving on horseback and in wagons, calling greetings, stomping snow off their boots. Sullivan met them at the door, booming a welcome. "Miss Hartley, glad you could make it. Come in, come in. Holt, get her settled, then come help me with this turkey. Damn thing weighs more than my horse." Inside, the ranch house was warm and smelled incredible, roasting meat and fresh bread and spices. A long table dominated the main room, already set with mismatched plates and utensils. People milled around, and Eleanor recognized Tommy and Ben, along with several other ranch hands. There were also a few families from nearby homesteads, women in practical dresses and men in clean shirts. Mrs. Chen was there, helping in the kitchen, and she waved at Eleanor with a smile. "Told you he was a good man," she called, nodding at Holt. Eleanor blushed, but before she could respond, a woman approached, hand extended. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair and a capable air. "You must be Miss Hartley. I am Julia Wilson. My husband Tom and I have a ranch about 10 miles north. I have been hearing all about you." "All good things, I hope." "Mostly good. Some people think you are crazy, but I think you are brave. It is not easy what you are doing." "Thank you." Julia drew her into conversation, introducing her to the other women, making her feel welcome. Eleanor relaxed, letting the warmth and noise wash over her. This was community, she realized. This was what she had been missing in Boston. Not just neighbors, but people who cared, who helped, who celebrated together. Dinner was a raucous affair, the table crowded, and the food abundant. Turkey and ham, potatoes and gravy, vegetables and bread and pies. Sullivan said a brief grace thanking God and good luck and hard work, and then everyone dug in. Eleanor sat between Holt and Mrs. Chen, eating until she thought she might burst, laughing at the stories being told around the table. After dinner, some of the men played cards while the women cleaned up. Eleanor helped wash dishes, listening to their talk, learning the gossip and news of the valley. Julia Wilson had a baby due in February. The Johnsons' eldest son was getting married. There was talk of the railroad extending a spur line to Copper Ridge, which would open up markets for cattle and crops. As the evening wore on, people began to leave, heading home while the weather held. Sullivan showed Eleanor to a small guest room upstairs, clean and comfortable. She thanked him profusely, and he waved it off. "You are part of the community now, Miss Hartley. We take care of each other. That is how we survive out here." Eleanor changed into her nightgown and lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the house settling. She felt full in more ways than one, nourished by food and friendship and belonging. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt she had made the right choice. Not just a brave choice or a desperate one, but the right one. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed and went downstairs to find Holt in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. He looked different in the morning light, softer and less guarded. "Morning," he said. "Sleep well?" "Very well, thank you." "Good. I thought we could have breakfast, then I'll take you home, if you're ready." "I am." They ate together, the house quiet around them, everyone else still sleeping or already out working. It felt intimate, domestic, like a glimpse of a possible future. Eleanor let herself imagine it, waking up every morning to Holt's presence, sharing meals and work and life. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Just that yesterday was wonderful. I have not felt that included, that welcome, in a very long time." "You're welcome here any time." Sullivan meant what he said. "You are part of things now." "I hope so." He reached across the table and took her hand, and the gesture was becoming familiar, comforting. "Eleanor, I want to tell you something. I've been thinking about it for a while, and yesterday, watching you with everyone, I was sure. I am falling in love with you. Maybe have been since the day you stepped off that stagecoach looking lost and determined and completely out of place. I know it is fast. I know we should probably take more time, but that is how I feel. And I needed you to know. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Holt, you do not have to say anything back. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I just needed to be honest with you. I am falling in love with you too, Eleanor said in a rush. I have been trying not to. Trying to focus on the cabin and surviving and building my life. But every time I see you, every time you leave, I miss you. I think about you constantly. I do not know if that is love or just loneliness or desperation, but whatever it is real. And it is yours. Holt stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her to her feet. He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing her cheek, and looked at her like she was something precious. Can I kiss you? Please. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she might break. Eleanor leaned into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and the kiss deepened. It was not her first kiss, but it was the first one that mattered, the first one that felt like a promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Holt rested his forehead against hers. That was worth waiting for, he said. Yes? They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, and Eleanor felt something settle in her chest. This was right. He was right. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the winter brought, they would face it together. The ride back to her cabin was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Holt helped her down from Daisy and walked her to the door. He kissed her again, slower this time, and Eleanor memorized the feel of it, the taste of coffee on his lips, the warmth of his hands on her waist. I will come by in a few days here, Sirendorinaiwe. Sooner if the weather allows. I will be here. Good. He smiled, that rare, transformative smile. Good, stay forever. He rode away, and Eleanor went inside, her lips still tingling, her heart full. She built up the fire, made tea, and sat at her table looking around her cabin. A few months ago she had been in Boston, trapped and miserable. Now she was in Montana, free and in love and more alive than she had ever been. December arrived with more snow and bitter cold. Eleanor worked hard, cutting firewood, maintaining the cabin, rationing her supplies. The days were short, the nights long. She was often lonely, but every few days Holt would appear, and the loneliness would recede. They would work together, eat together, sit by the fire and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes he stayed late, too late to ride back to the ranch safely, and Eleanor would make up a bedroll by the fire for him. She knew people would gossip if they found out, but she did not care. They were not doing anything wrong, just keeping each other company, building something that felt solid and real. One evening in mid-December, as they sat side by side on her narrow bed, Holt said, Eleanor, I need to ask you something. What? Would you consider marrying me? The question hung in the air between them. Eleanor's breath caught, and she turned to look at him. He was serious, his gray eyes steady on hers. Marry you, she repeated. I know it is fast. We have only known each other a few months. But I love you, and I think you love me, and I do not see the point in waiting. Life is too short and too uncertain. I want to build a future with you, Eleanor. I want to help you make this land thrive. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep next to you every night. I want a life with you. Will you have me? Eleanor felt tears spill down her cheeks. Yes, yes, Holt, I will marry you. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply, and Eleanor wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. This was it, she thought. This was the life she had been looking for. Not just independence, but partnership. Not just surviving, but living. When? She asked, when they finally pulled apart. As soon as possible. We can go to town, talk to the preacher, maybe get married at New Year, start the year as husband and wife. What do you think? I think that sounds perfect. They made plans that night, sitting by the fire and holding hands. Holt would talk to Sullivan, see if they could build a small addition onto the cabin, make more space. Eleanor would write to her aunt, inform her of the marriage, though she did not expect a response. They would have a small ceremony, just close friends, and then they would settle in to face the winter together. The news spread quickly once they announced it. Mrs. Chen was thrilled, immediately offering to help with a dress. Julia Wilson rode out through the snow to congratulate Eleanor and offer advice on marriage, delivered with humor and warmth. Even Sullivan seemed pleased, granting Holt time off to work on the cabin addition. The week before the wedding, Holt moved his belongings to Eleanor's cabin. It was not much. Everything he owned fit in 2 saddlebags and a trunk, but it felt significant. They were building a home together, combining their lives in concrete ways. Mrs. Chen made Eleanor a dress, simple but beautiful, cream-colored wool with lace at the collar and cuffs. Holt bought a new shirt and had his vest mended. They were getting married on New Year's Day, 1885, and Eleanor had never been more certain of anything in her life. The ceremony was held at Mrs. Chen's house, the parlor crowded with people. The preacher, an old man with a gentle manner, led them through the vows. Eleanor promised to love and honor Holt, and he promised the same to her. He slid a simple gold band onto her finger, and she did the same for him. And then they were married, and everyone cheered, and Holt kissed her in front of all their friends. They had a small celebration, food and drink and laughter. Tommy played a fiddle, badly but enthusiastically, and couples danced in the cramped space. Sullivan made a toast, wishing them happiness and strong sons. Julia gave Eleanor a quilt she had made, beautiful patchwork in blues and greens. Mrs. Chen cried and hugged them both. As the afternoon wore into evening, Holt and Eleanor slipped away, riding back to their cabin under a sky full of stars. The cold was intense, but Eleanor barely felt it. She was warm from the inside out, full of love and hope and joy. Inside the cabin, Holt built up the fire while Eleanor changed out of her wedding dress. When she emerged in her nightgown, he was waiting, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. He crossed the room and took her hands, kissing her gently. "My wife," he said, tasting the word. "My husband." They made love that night, awkward and tender and perfect, discovering each other in the firelight. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Eleanor felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Forever." The winter was long and hard, as everyone had warned. Snow piled high, and some days they could not open the door. But they were together, and that made all the difference. Holt taught Eleanor to play cards, and she taught him to read better. They worked on plans for spring planting, argued about crop choices, made love in front of the fire. In February, Julia Wilson had her baby, a healthy boy she named Daniel. Eleanor and Holt rode through the snow to visit, bringing food and gifts. Holding that tiny baby, Eleanor felt a longing she had not expected. She wanted children, she realized. She wanted to fill this cabin with life and laughter. She mentioned it to Holt that night, hesitant and uncertain. He smiled and pulled her close. "I want that too. A family. Sons and daughters running around making noise and chaos, but there is time. Let us get through this winter, get crops in the ground, and then if you want, we will start trying." March brought a thaw, the snow melting into the creek, the world turning brown and muddy. Eleanor and Holt worked from dawn to dusk preparing the land. They cleared more ground, broke up soil, planned irrigation. Sullivan lent them a mule, and Holt taught Eleanor to plow. In April, as the first green began to show, they planted. Vegetables and grain, carefully spaced, lovingly tended. Eleanor watched the seeds go into the ground and felt profound hope. She had come in the wrong season for planting, but now finally it was the right time. She was planting her future. The crops grew, and with them Eleanor's confidence. She had done it. She had survived the winter, built a home, found love, and now she was farming her own land. She wrote to her aunt, a long letter describing everything that had happened. To her surprise, her aunt wrote back. The letter was stiff and formal, But it ended with a grudging admission that Eleanor seemed happy, and perhaps that was what mattered. In late May, Eleanor missed her monthly bleeding. She did not mention it immediately, afraid to hope. But when June arrived and she still had not bled, she told Holt. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. "A baby! We are having a baby!" Eleanor laughed, holding tight to him. It would seem so. They told their friends, who reacted with delight. Mrs. Chen immediately began knitting baby clothes. Julia gave Eleanor advice, practical and comforting. Sullivan promised them a calf from the ranch's spring calving, a gift for the child. The summer passed in a blur of work and preparation. The crops grew strong, and Holt estimated they would have enough harvest to feed themselves and sell some besides. He built a cradle from wood he had cut and sanded smooth. Eleanor sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were. Her body changed, swelling with the life inside her. Holt was endlessly gentle, rubbing her aching back, helping with the heavier chores. He talked to her belly, telling the baby about the ranch and the mountains and the life they were building. In late summer, they had their first real harvest. Vegetables filled baskets. Grain filled sacks. It was not much by commercial standards, but it was enough. More than enough. It was proof that they could do this, that the land would sustain them. They celebrated with a dinner at the cabin, inviting Sullivan and Tommy and Mrs. Chen and the Wilsons. They ate food Eleanor had grown, bread made from grain she had planted, and the satisfaction was immense. "You did it," Sullivan said, raising his glass. "You came in the wrong season, but you stayed anyway, and you made it work. That is something to be proud of." "We all did it," Eleanor replied. "Without your help, without all of you, I would not have survived. Thank you." Fall arrived, and with it the knowledge that another winter was coming, but this time Eleanor was not afraid. She had Holt, she had a home, she had a community, and she had a child coming, due in early winter. The baby arrived on a cold December night, almost exactly a year after Eleanor had married Holt. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Chen and Julia Wilson. Eleanor screamed and swore and wept, and through it all Holt held her hand, white-faced, but steady. When the baby finally emerged, crying lustily, Mrs. Chen announced, "A boy! A healthy, beautiful boy!" She cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket, placing him in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor looked down at her son, at his scrunched red face and tiny fists, and felt love so fierce it terrified her. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, little one." Holt leaned over, touching the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. "He is perfect. What should we call him?" They had discussed names, but now, looking at their son, Eleanor knew. James Sullivan Holloway, after you and the man who helped us when we needed it most." "James," Holt repeated, and his voice cracked. "Our son." Mrs. Chen and Julia left them alone, and the three of them lay in the bed together, Holt and Eleanor flanking little James. Outside snow was falling, but inside the fire burned warm and bright. "We did it," Eleanor said. "We built this. A life, a family, a home." "You did it," Holt corrected. "You came here with nothing in the wrong season, and you stayed anyway. You made this happen." "We made it happen. Together." He kissed her, soft and sweet. "Together. I like the sound of that." The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. James grew strong and healthy, a laughing child with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. 2 years later, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter, Mary, with dark blonde hair and a stubborn streak. And 2 years after that, another son, Benjamin, who was quiet and thoughtful from the start. The farm grew too. Each year they cleared a little more land, planted a little more crop. They bought more livestock, first chickens, then pigs, then a cow for milk. The cabin had 2 additions now, making space for their growing family. Holt had become a partner in Broken Creek Ranch, Sullivan having recognized his value and loyalty. Eleanor sold vegetables and preserves in town, earning money that went toward improvements and savings. Their children grew up running wild across the valley, learning to ride almost before they could walk. James was serious and responsible, always helping with the work. Mary was fearless, climbing trees and catching snakes and giving her mother heart palpitations. Benjamin was the dreamer, always wandering off to look at birds or flowers or clouds. Mrs. Chen became a beloved grandmother figure, always ready with cookies and stories. The Wilsons remained close friends, their children and Eleanor's playing together. Sullivan grew older but no less formidable, still running the ranch with an iron hand and a generous heart. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Holt gave Eleanor a gift. It was a wooden sign, beautifully carved, that read, Hartley Farm. "Your name," he explained. "You started this place. It should bear your name." Eleanor traced the letters with her finger, tears in her eyes. "Holt Holloway Farm," she said. "It is both of ours." He hung the sign over the door, and it stayed there, weathering storms and seasons, a marker of what they had built together. Eleanor thought often about that first day, stepping off the stagecoach into the dust and fear and hope. She thought about Holt telling her she had come in the wrong season for planting. She had, but she had stayed anyway. And somehow that had been exactly right. She had not found just land or independence or a new life. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Holt would pull Eleanor close and say the same thing he had said on their wedding night, "I love you, forever." And Eleanor would respond, "Forever." The valley changed slowly over the years. The railroad did come, bringing more people and opportunities. Copper Ridge grew from a dying town to a thriving community. New families arrived, new farms were established, but Holt Holloway Farm remained a cornerstone, the place people pointed to when they talked about hard work and determination. Eleanor became known as someone to ask for advice, a woman who had come from the East and made a success of frontier life. She helped new arrivals, taught women to garden and preserve food, shared what she had learned through hard experience. She never forgot how lost she had felt that first day, and she made sure no one else had to feel that way. Holt became a respected figure in the valley, known for his fairness and skill. He trained young ranch hands, broke difficult horses, and helped Sullivan make decisions about the ranch. But his heart was always at the farm with his family, working the land they had claimed together. The children grew and eventually left to make their own lives. James took over the farm, marrying a girl from town and starting the cycle anew. Mary shocked everyone by becoming a teacher, moving to Helena and opening a school. Benjamin studied botany, traveling east for education before returning to Montana to work with the Forestry Service, but they all came back for holidays, for celebrations, filling the house with noise and laughter and grandchildren. Eleanor and Holt grew older together, their hands gnarled from work, their faces lined by sun and wind, but they were happy, deeply and truly happy. On their 30th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch of the cabin, now expanded into a proper house. Their grandchildren played in the yard, James's children and the offspring of Mary and Benjamin. The farm spread out before them, fields golden with harvest, livestock grazing peacefully, mountains rising in the distance. "Do you ever regret it?" Holt asked, "leaving Boston, coming here?" Eleanor laughed, "Not for a single moment. Do you regret helping a foolish woman who arrived in the wrong season?" "I regret nothing, except maybe not kissing you sooner." "You kissed me plenty." "Not enough. Never enough." He took her hand, the gesture as familiar as breathing. "You came in the wrong season for planting, but you stayed anyway. And you said, 'Good, stay forever.'" "Best thing I ever said." Eleanor leaned against him, watching their family, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. She thought about that scared, determined woman who had stepped off the stagecoach, about the journey that had brought her here, about the choices and chances and moments of grace. She had come looking for independence and found so much more. She had come alone and built a family. She had come to plant seeds and grown a life. "I would do it all again," she said quietly, every hard moment, every mistake, every struggle, because it led me here, to you, to this. Holt kissed her temple. Same, love, same. They sat in the fading light, holding hands, surrounded by the life they had built. The wrong season had become the right one. The end had become the beginning. And the cowboy who had told her to stay forever had kept his promise, as had she. They stayed. Forever. The farm continued to thrive for generations, a testament to two people who had met at exactly the right wrong time. And if you visit Copper Ridge, Montana today, you can still see the mountains rising against the sky, still feel the wind that carries stories of those who came before, still sense the love that built a life from nothing but hope and hard work and a stubborn refusal to give up. Eleanor and Holt lived into their 70s, always together, always in love, always grateful for that October day when everything changed. When they finally passed within months of each other, as longtime couples often do, they were buried on a hill overlooking the farm, under a stone that read Hartley Holloway together forever. And on winter nights, when the snow falls soft over the valley, people say you can see a light in the window of the old farmhouse, a lamp lit to show the way home, a reminder that sometimes the wrong season is exactly the right time, and sometimes staying is the bravest thing you can do. James and his wife kept the farm going, teaching their children the same lessons Eleanor and Holt had taught them. Work hard, help your neighbors, never give up, and plant seeds even when the season seems wrong. You never know what might grow. The cycle continued, generation after generation, and the land that Eleanor had bought sight unseen, that Holt had helped her tame, remained in the family. It grew and changed, adapted to new times and technologies, but the heart of it stayed the same. It was a place built on love and determination, a place where people came to start over, to grow, to belong. And every spring, when the first green shoots push through the soil, the family gathers at Eleanor and Holt's grave to tell their story. About a woman who came in the wrong season for planting and stayed anyway. About a cowboy who said good, stay forever. About a love that grew like crops in good soil, strong and true and lasting. The story always ends the same way, with the oldest member of the family, Eleanor's great-great-grandchild, saying, "And they did stay, forever," teaching us that the right time is the time you choose to begin, and the right place is wherever you decide to put down roots. May we all be so brave. The sun sets over the Montana Valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The mountains stand eternal, the creek flows silver, and the land waits patiently for spring, for the season of planting, for the moment when seeds become life. And somewhere in the wind, if you listen carefully, you can hear laughter. Eleanor and Holt, forever together, forever home. Their love story became legend in the valley, the kind of story people told around fires on winter nights, the kind that made young people believe in possibility and old people remember their own choices. It was a story about courage and timing and the strange alchemy that happens when two people find each other against all odds. The Hartley Holloway farm stood as proof that wrong seasons could become right ones, that foolish decisions could become wise ones, that love could grow even in the hardest soil. And every year, when new families arrived in Montana looking for fresh starts and new lives, someone would tell them about Eleanor and Holt. She came in October, they would say, wrong time for planting, but she stayed, and he helped her, and they built something beautiful together. What happened to them, the newcomers would ask, and the old-timers would smile. They lived, they loved, they stayed, forever. Because in the end, that was the whole story, not the struggles or the hardships or the cold winters and hard work. Just two people who chose each other, chose the land, chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. They planted seeds in the wrong season and reaped a harvest of love that lasted generations. They came to Montana as strangers and left as legends. They started with nothing but hope and built everything that mattered. Eleanor Hartley had stepped off that stagecoach looking for independence and found partnership. Holt Holloway had been drifting through life and found an anchor. Together they had created something neither could have built alone: a home, a family, a legacy of love that would outlive them both. And when the last word of their story was spoken, when the fire burned low and the listeners went to their beds, the truth remained. Sometimes the wrong season is exactly the right time. Sometimes the most foolish decision is the wisest one. Sometimes all you need is someone to say, "Good, stay forever," and the courage to say yes. Eleanor and Holt had found that courage. They had said yes to each other, to the land, to the life they could build together. And in doing so, they had created something rare and precious and worth remembering: a love story, a farm, a family, a forever. The end, and also the beginning, because love stories like this never truly end. They grow and change and continue, seeds planted in the wrong season that bloom forever.